Deep in the quiet backroads of Alabama, hidden beneath years of overgrowth, stood a small wooden cabin once linked to Hank Williams. For decades, it remained untouched, more a memory than a place. Locals spoke of it with a kind of reverence, not fear, as if the land itself had chosen to protect its story. When historians and family representatives finally stepped inside after so many years, they didn't find anything dramatic or frightening. Instead, they found something quieter, more human. The cabin felt preserved in time, like a paused moment waiting to be understood. Every creak of the floor and every beam overhead seemed to hold a memory, not of legend, but of a man searching for peace away from the noise of fame and expectation. The first glimpse. Inside a life paused in time. When the door opened, a soft light filtered through the worn wooden walls, revealing a simple, lived-in space. It wasn't grand or mysterious, just honest. A rocking chair sat near the fireplace, slightly angled as if someone had stood up and never returned. On a nearby table rested a well-used Bible and a few personal items, quietly arranged. There was no sense of drama, only stillness. In one corner, a guitar leaned gently against the wall, its presence speaking louder than any words. It reminded everyone that this was not just a place where a legend stayed, but where a man once sat, thought, and created. The room didn't feel abandoned, it felt respected, like time had chosen to leave it untouched out of kindness. At a desk filled with thoughts and unfinished words. Near a small wooden desk, the team found papers carefully stacked, covered in handwriting that carried both confidence and vulnerability. These were not just lyrics, but reflections. Some pages held lines that would later echo in songs, while others seemed more personal, like quiet conversations written down. Among them was a letter addressed to Hank Williams Jr., filled with thoughtful words about life, responsibility, and staying grounded. It wasn't dramatic or sorrowful, just sincere. The tone revealed a father trying to express himself the best way he knew how. In those pages, the distance between public figure and private person disappeared. What remained was a man trying to make sense of his world through words, just as he had always done through music. Photographs that told a softer story. Pinned to the wall and tucked into drawers were photographs that offered glimpses into quieter moments. One showed Audrey Williams smiling beside him, capturing a time that felt simple and real. Another showed him alone with a guitar, seated near a lake, completely at ease. These images didn't tell stories of fame or performance. They showed stillness, connection, and reflection. There was no sign of conflict, only moments that felt deeply personal. For historians, these photographs helped reshape the narrative. They revealed a balance often missed in public memory, showing that alongside the pressures of success, there were also pockets of calm. These small snapshots became reminders that even the most celebrated lives are made up of ordinary, meaningful moments. A hidden space of personal reflections. Behind part of the cabin wall, the team discovered a small hidden compartment. Inside was a wooden chest filled with journals and keepsakes. The journals, written in the final years of his life, didn't contain anything dramatic. Instead, they were thoughtful, almost meditative. He wrote about music, about faith, and about wanting to create something meaningful. There was a sense of reflection rather than struggle. One entry spoke about the importance of honesty in songwriting, describing music as a way to stay connected to truth. The writing showed someone aware of his path and thoughtful about where it might lead. Rather than mystery, the journals offered clarity. They showed a man quietly trying to understand himself and the world around him. Objects that carried quiet, meaning. Inside the cabin, several personal items told their own stories. A neatly folded stage outfit rested in a trunk, alongside handwritten sheets of music. There was also a small box containing simple keepsakes, including a child's drawing and a few letters. None of these items were extraordinary on their own, but together they painted a picture of a life filled with connection. These were reminders of family, creativity, and moments that mattered away from the spotlight. one could sense that these objects were chosen carefully, kept not for their value, but for their meaning. They reflected a man who, despite everything, held on to the things that grounded him. In their simplicity, they spoke louder than any headline ever could. A recording that felt like a conversation. Among the most remarkable discoveries was an old recording tape labeled simply as a private session. When restored, it revealed something deeply personal. It wasn't a performance meant for an audience, but a quiet recording, almost like a conversation with himself. Hank Williams spoke softly between melodies, reflecting on music, life, and the meaning behind his songs. The tone was calm, thoughtful, and honest. There was no sense of finality, just a man sharing his thoughts in the moment. Listening to it felt less like uncovering history and more like being invited into a private space. It reminded everyone that behind every song was a voice still searching, still learning, and still trying to connect. And a letter meant for the journey. Ahead, another discovery was a letter tucked away carefully, written during the final days of his life. It wasn't addressed to anyone specific, but it read like a message meant for whoever might one day find it. The words were reflective, filled with gratitude for music and the path it had given him. He wrote about the importance of staying true to oneself and finding peace in simple moments. There was no sense of fear or regret, only acceptance. The letter felt like a quiet closing chapter, not an ending, but a transition. It showed a man who understood his journey and chose to express it with honesty. For those who read it, the message was clear and deeply human. The role of love and shared memories. As more details came to light, it became clear that the cabin wasn't just a solitary retreat. It also held memories connected to Audrey Williams. According to family accounts, the cabin had once been a place where they spent peaceful time together away from public life. The carved initials on the wall stood as a quiet reminder of that connection. These details added another layer to the story, showing that the space wasn't only about reflection, but also about shared experiences. It became a symbol of both independence and companionship. Understanding this helped reshape how people viewed the cabin. It wasn't just a personal sanctuary, but a place where relationships and memories were formed and preserved, on a legacy that feels closer than ever. In the end, the discoveries inside the cabin didn't reveal anything shocking or unsettling. Instead, they brought clarity and warmth to the story of Hank Williams. They showed a man who valued music, family, and honesty above all else. The cabin itself became more than a historical site. It became a reminder that behind every legend is a human story filled with quiet moments, thoughtful words, and meaningful connections. Today, it stands preserved as it was found, not as a monument to fame, but as a reflection of a life lived with depth and sincerity. And in that stillness, his legacy feels not distant, but deeply present.